You're listening to the best goddamn podcast available with your host, Rob Childs.
Simple. And yeah, then we're just good to go. I don't like doing any long intros or anything like that. I like this to just be an actual conversation, between you and I. And
Okay.
we had started off speaking last week and kind of went through a little bit about your story, and it intrigued me a lot because just from the very small, little story that I got, it seems like we're on very similar. You've kind of already gone down the path that I'm trying to go down from where I've been. So I was hoping today we could kind of get into it and elaborate a little bit more.
Sure.
And hopefully help some other people believe that they too can do big things coming from small places. So Stacey, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And yeah, let's just kind of dive right in and start with your story and
Sure.
kind of where you grew up at and everything.
So, I gave some thought to this before today, and the hamster wheel that you see, the little rodent, and he's running and running and running and running, and he never stops. So when I think about the hamster on the wheel, to me, she's resilient. That's a resilient little animal that just doesn't stop pushing through. And for me, my journey of hyper resiliency really started when I was about 15 years old, when I left home. I left a really, really good home. And I had three things. I had my garbage bag full of clothes. I had my dad's last words, which were, you walk out that door, you're going to be nothing. You're going to be less than nothing. And the promise that I made to him, which was, really, I'm going to show you, I'm going to be a lawyer. And I turned away and I laughed. And I realized in that very short walk to the place that I had arranged to stay, that if I was going to get through this, if I was going to now survive, I needed to build this suit of armor that protected me from everything that I ended up having to experience. So I was strong, super strong on the outside, that sort of, you can't hurt me, you can't knock me down attitude. And in the meantime, she'll be this terrified little girl with no clue in the world what she's just done or how it's going to turn out. And I spent 5 years living different places, different people, sometimes no place to live. I worked hard. I went to school because I made a promise. And there was no way I was going to break that promise that I made to my dad and to myself. And when I think about it in hindsight, that was just me being me. But it meant something. And so that kept me focused, kept me going. I finished high school, didn't get arrested. Figured that was a win. I survived, right? I survived everything that comes along with being a 15-year-old girl who's living on her own. It wasn't pretty. And then I got home. About 5 years later, I reconciled with my family. And I had spent 5 years wearing this heavy suit of armor, and I had been the only during those 5 years, right? I was the only person who didn't have a family. I was the only person who didn't have a support system. I had to learn to hide in plain sight, live small, read a room. I had to learn how to do what I had to do to survive. So when I got home, I didn't have to be this survivor, right? I thought, I'm home. This is good. Yeah. But my family had grown up and my family had moved on without me. So I still had to stay that hyper resilient young woman now, carrying around this suit of armor, because I had gone from someone who had to survive to someone who now had something to prove, because what I didn't want was my family to see me as a victim.
Yeah, that's a horrible place to feel like you're being viewed as, for sure. I guess my first question that I feel like you kind of glossed over is I left my home when I was 16. and I've known quite a few people that are similar situations, but traditionally it's not leaving a good home. It's leaving a
Yeah.
bad home. So at the age of 15, what kind of prompted you to decide to make the decision that you're leaving, a good environment? Or was the environment not good? It just looked good.
The environment was great. The
Okay.
environment was great. Like, I came from a well-off, upper middle class family, mom, a dad, two sisters, no issue. But things happened that made me think that I didn't belong there anymore. And it's, as stupid as this sounds, when I was about 14-ish, I found out that my dad was actually my stepfather. And I remember this overwhelming thought is like, this isn't my family? Wait a minute. I thought these were my sisters. I thought this was my mom and dad. And now I'm not even part of this family anymore. Then I met a guy who my parents knew right off the bat was an idiot. I didn't see it.
Yeah,
I didn't want to see it.
Yep.
And I think, he obviously knew what had happened the year before, and he picked up on that, and he and his family became very manipulative. And it turned into this, you're right, Stacey. Your family doesn't love you. Your family doesn't want you. You're not part of them. You should come and be part of us. And I started skipping school. My parents found out. They got really mad. And it turned into this power struggle between my family, my parents, and this guy over me.
Mm-hmm.
And the anger and the tension. And it just became such a bad environment where we were constantly fighting at home, and I'm sneaking around and I'm skipping school and I'm lying and I'm doing everything that I think is the right thing to do because somebody else is whispering in my other ear. All along, I've got two sisters who are seeing this whole thing happening. And I think it just got to the point where I didn't know where I belonged. And I thought the only thing I could do to fix it was to leave. And I did.
Yeah, I remember that feeling very, very intensely of just, the final straw. And you said something about at 14 finding out that your father wasn't your father. I didn't experience that. I just never knew who he was until I was 16, met him once or twice, and that was kind of it. But I remember hearing stories that weren't true, and that betrayal at such a young age.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. However you want to word it, look at it, it's a betrayal. And from such a young age to find out that the reality that you've used as a comfort zone has been impenetrated. It's not real. It's been all lies, and everybody but you knew. That will throw anybody, in front of a bus so to say. It's not something that to be taken lightly at all, because as a kid, your family is all that you have, and if
That's
you
right.
don't have that, you search for it. And, everybody that I've known searches for some level of community. And unfortunately, it's very commonplace for younger girls to fall into like these traps of like, generally a little bit older guys that can put off this persona of they have their shit together.
Yeah.
Everybody else is dumb. Listen to them. And it genuinely leads you down the path to where if you're lucky, you get in a 12-step program later on in life.
Yeah.
Just from like my experience. So you made this promise at a very young age that you were going to become an attorney. You're homeless for 5 years, still graduated high school. So I'm proud of you for that, because
Thank you.
that I never graduated high school. I did the GED. It's like the equivalent. And so very proud of you for doing that. That's amazing. How do you take this experience? Because those 5 years, I'm assuming, impacted you more than if you would have stayed at home. Could you talk a little bit about that and how just that the level of reliving that life had some experience on you.
So, once I got home and I decided that I can't, like, there's just this overwhelming, everybody was happy, right? But the underlying tone was there was a lot of sympathy. Poor Stacey. She's had such a tough life. And I didn't like that because I hadn't, for 5 years, I was never poor Stacey, at least not in my mind. It was tough Stacey. That's tough as nails. That old blow up clown, that you would hit and it would bounce back and it would pop back up.
Yeah.
That was me. Like, that was me for 5 years. You could do what you want. You can knock me down, but damn right I was getting back up. So at that time, when I moved back home, I came across Tony Robbins for the first time and I started listening to him. And I thought, you know what? I don't have to tell myself the story that I'm a victim. My story that I'm going to tell myself is I'm a survivor. And I started looking back and going over certain things that had happened to me. And instead of, looking at it from the negative perspective, I found the story that made me stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my very best to turn it around and tell myself, I'm okay. I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to keep moving, blinders on like the horse race. I'm going to keep going and I'm going to be okay. But the problem with that, and I talked about this earlier, is this, it's this armor. And when you go through life being so hyper resilient, everything gets buried inside. Mm-hmm. Everything, every feeling, every emotion, all of that. I couldn't trust myself and I couldn't trust anybody around me because everything had to be kept inside because I had to keep the persona up.
Sure.
And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's really exhausting.
Yeah. There's this next question may be exhausting as well because it's a little bit deeper. It's something that I've witnessed in going down this LSAT journey and becoming very close with my fiance's family. They don't know most of my history. They know some bullet points, and later on we're going to have a long conversation. But it's just not really needed right now. But they came from a very well off middle class family, and when I come around, they're very accepting. It's almost it's like my family. It's amazing. But there's this level of programming that I've noticed to where when you come from certain places, you're expected to act certain ways. Yeah. And if you do not fit that mold, you're the black sheep of the family. And you're not looked at as strong. You're not looked at as the person that can get knocked down and get back up. You're looked at as stupid because you keep trying and keep failing, at least from my perspective. And so I guess my question is, I'm just, and this is just an assumption that programming kind of existed in your very young childhood. Going from that to, let's just call it like the streets or whatever, what it is, to where you no longer have that parental guidance around you and you're running your own life, and then life smacks you in the face. Were you able to take that as like a positivity, or was that a huge anxiety and fear of like, oh shit, this is real?
Huge anxiety and fear. Huge.
Yeah.
Until recently. So I find it interesting that you talk about it from the sense of a mold. And my first thought that came to mind was, whose narrative is that? Is that yours? Or is that everybody else's? Or what you think everybody else thinks? Yeah.
For me, I'm still trying to figure it out. I know my upbringing was extremely violent. Just not something that I really get into too much. It was not good. And so being around friends and everything, I would be 8, 9 years old, and it would be nothing for me to tell an adult to fuck off. Like, you are not, like, fuck you. Who are you?
Yep.
And everybody just look at me like, whoa. And like it instantly drew this line of like, you're not one of us. Like
Yep.
you cannot do those things. You cannot say the outlandish thoughts that you have in your head. And that's kind of where the analogous mold, I believe, is coming from, is just the pushback on trying to actively be who I feel I am at that time and express it and not being allowed to. And I feel like that happens way more in middle class and upper middle class families than is ever talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You got the helicopter moms and all that stuff. You're just not allowed to experience life. And so I guess that was kind of my assumption of what it was like in that environment. And then you getting thrown into, guess what? You don't have a bed upstairs with your own shower anymore. You don't have breakfast in the morning. You get a couch.
Yep.
Do you have money? No, you don't get breakfast.
No.
And that's real, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess that would
I know.
be my the expansion on my mold theory.
So it's interesting because, you know, leaving home and being gone for 5 years was just the first of many challenges that I've had to fight through to get to where I actually am today.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everybody talks about COVID and everything else. And what I learned during COVID was that I actually had a chance to slow down, step off of that, you know, hamster wheel where I'm just keep going. I'm just pushing through. I'm still fighting. And I learned that as a child, as we're growing up, right, we build this foundation of values and beliefs. And those values and beliefs come from the people that are most important to us, right? So in your case, you're a young guy, you're 8, 9 years old. You've been told by your parents, you've been told by adults, you can't talk that way. Our parents tell us, be a good girl and sit over there and be quiet. All of their values and beliefs are instilled on us at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that as we grow up and we become adults, we have new experiences, and our values and beliefs that we have about ourselves is really just an extension of the ones that have been instilled in us. And why that's important, it's because the values and beliefs that you have about yourself, not about, you know, like sort of the world in general, but just about you,
mm-hmm.
that's what forms the basis for the stories that you tell yourself. And that's what guides how you interact in the world. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, 1,000%. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I want to get into your story a little bit deeper here pretty soon, but I can, in the way that you speak, you've done work. You've put the work in. And you know what that work means just by saying that. You mentioned Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
I've not read his books. I've seen like the documentary on Netflix. Personally, when I first heard about him, I was like, he's a fraud. It's just some guy telling other people what to do to make money, you know, and that is essentially what he's doing. But what he's saying is not wrong. And there's thousands of people that are like that. And there's this pushback on, you know, like this ignorance, exactly like I had of, well, he's just trying to make money, so whatever he says isn't valid. And that's just not true, because you can gain advice from anybody that's had experience. And so I wanted to give you this experience, kind of this thing that I learned, and then kind of segue that into this next question. There's a YouTuber named Casey Neistat, and he grew up in Connecticut, and, you know, nice family or whatever, but he was the black sheep. And he was the one that was fucking up and everything. He wanted to move to New York, become a filmmaker, and he did it. But in doing that, he learned and created this theory. It was called the Tarzan theory, that if you don't know what you need to do next, life will give you a vine. It's just up to you of whether or not you grab it. And you got to drop all expectation of where it's taking you and just do the next thing. And eventually the work will catch up. and then things will start to fall in place, and the universe just kind of gives you this life. And so I wanted to take that and kind of compare that to where we ended off at. Your story is now you're 20, you've graduated high school, you're back at home with your parents.
Back home with my parents.
Right around now is when you should be, in freshman, sophomore in a university, especially when you're planning on law school. And for some reason, I feel like that's not what happened. So what happened at 20 years old?
Yeah, I found a job as a receptionist at a law firm. I figured, you know what? A good place to start. I got married. I had 2 kids, 2 boys, and life went on. I worked. I went to night school. I became a paralegal. And I started working for a different firm as a paralegal. And I just kept going. And I did that for probably about until 1997, maybe about 15 odd years. And by this time, I know a lot of lawyers. And I'm telling everybody, I'm going to be a lawyer one day. I left home, but I'm going to be a lawyer and blah, blah, blah. And everybody knew this was my plan. I had no idea how I was going to do it.
Were you scared telling people this?
I think I was.
Okay.
But it comes from, I was, but you know what it comes from? It comes from that suit of armor, right?
Yeah.
It comes from that, I'm Stacey Lynnes and I'm doing it. It comes from that tough girl exterior that I have been crafting for now 20 years. Because even the time when I was married, it was a struggle, to put it bluntly. Like my ex-husband worked off and on. I was always the main breadwinner. I have 2 wonderful, like I said, 2 wonderful kids. We had dogs, but we were, midnight move from rental to rental, not having enough money to pay the bills. The month comes and there's no money left. So it was hard, but it was just, nope, one day I'm going to be a lawyer. Don't ask me how, but I'm going to do it. And finally, and sorry, just to back up, once I started talking to people about that, the amount of ridicule, the amount of times that people said to me, really? Okay, Stacey.
Yep.
What does your husband think of that? Dude, I'm going to kill you at that point. Who do you think you are that you could be a lawyer? It was unbelievable, the reaction that I was getting from everybody. And until I met one lawyer, and he finally just looked at me and said, why are you still talking about this? Why are you just not doing it? And I'm like, damn, you're right. So here's how Tony Robbins impacted me for the second time. I went back to him, and have you ever seen the movie Scrooge, A Christmas Carol?
Yeah,
not the Bill Murray version.
Is there like a Jim Carrey type looking character as like the cover?
No, yeah, well, it was Bill Murray, but if you go all the way back, to the days of black and white, it's a really old movie, and it's about this crotchety old guy who is bitter and he's angry at life, and his business partner dies, goes to sleep just before Christmas, and the ghost of Christmas past comes to visit him, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas future. And these 3 ghosts give him the opportunity to see what his life will be like if he doesn't change. So, here I am. I'm in my basement, stuff everywhere, and I got the Walkman, right, with the cassette, because I'm a bit older. And Tony says, okay, sit in the chair, close your eyes, just relax, think about what you want to do in life, and think about where you want to go. Imagine how you'll feel a year from now if you don't do it. 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And as I did this, I got smaller and smaller. My breathing changed. I felt tough. And then he said, okay, stand up, shake it off. Now think about how you're going to feel if you follow through and you find a way. How are you going to feel in 3 years? How are you going to feel in 5 years?
Yeah.
And then I was like, man, I feel good. And my state changed. And as much as people think that, all this stuff is, like you said, a bunch of crap, my physical state changed and my outlook changed. And I realized that for everything I've done in my life up until then, no matter how bad it was, I had no regrets. And I damn well wasn't going to let making the decision not to go to law school be the one regret I have in life. Because there's going to come a day where I'm going to be that little old lady, probably the crazy cat lady or the dog lady on my rocking chair on the porch. And I don't want to be sitting there thinking I could have.
Yeah. What would happen if I just tried?
What happens? So what?
Yeah.
So what? And so this whole Tarzan theory is very similar to what Tony Robbins talks about. And then another guy by the name of Tom Bilyeu, who studied Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist who talks about growth mindset. And even the Tarzan theory is the same thing. It's if you just grab, it doesn't matter if that vine that you grab gets you to where you want to go. That's not what matters. What matters is that you've taken the first step and now you're learning. Too many people look at where we want to go and say, oh, I can't get there. And they don't even try.
Yeah.
The growth doesn't come from the accomplishment. The growth comes from trying to do it.
Yeah. So I know for me, law was not the plan 2 years ago, to be honest. I went to rehab 5 years ago.
Awesome.
Sober for 5 years on May 15th. And
congratulations.
My plan was I was going to be a dietitian and work with fighters. And I applied to grad school. Like I had 2 universities that I had flunked out of already because I was just partying and, I was that guy. And so my GPA from those schools they were just like, you can't make up this gap. It's not going to happen, and that crushed me. Like that tore me down to where I was just like, fuck, like I worked so hard. I put like 4 years into this thing. This is something that like I told everybody I was going to do this. Watch me. I even started taking on my own friends that were already fighters as clients and building this thing. And then it just all came down to a single no. And the one thing that I've always wanted to do was get into law. And it had nothing to do with the money and the suits. And I don't even like wearing suits.
Tell me about it.
I wanted to find out there's a barrier between the general population and an attorney to what you're allowed to do. As an attorney, you can protect people that do not have the ability to do that for themselves. And coming from a bad place, that was just something I felt that it was a responsibility. So I started telling a couple friends, like couple, like, hey, I'm going to do this. And then I was leaving work one day and I was T-boned doing like 60, 65. Car rolled a flip a few times and hit a tree. I ended up in the hospital and I had to have spine surgery. I still have to have knee surgery. But and that was a year ago. And so it left me with this thought of, this is something I really want to do. Like I've always wanted to, but it's like trying to tell a homeless person, just go pick up $1 million, like there's so many steps. So I just started picking away and going at them. And in doing that, I realized that I've faced anxiety of like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to have a place to sleep tonight. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have something to eat, not just now, but for tomorrow. Are people after me, all of these things. And it's made the anxiety of this building process a little bit easier because I've gone through so much more. So my question to you is, do you feel like you've been able to use that anxiety as a younger kid that you've had and overcoming those issues to be able to deal with the problems of actually starting that process and getting into law school? Because even though you're a paralegal at this point, you cannot just say, I'm going to be an attorney and sign a piece of paper. You have at least 3 to 4 years before you get your first interview to be stuffed in a corner office to told you are going to read papers for a couple of years, deal with it, do you feel like that helped you at all?
I do. I do. Yeah, I do. Because from that anxiety came the, you can't hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, yes, I had anxiety. First year going to law school was hard. I was driving 2 hours a day. I lived in a small town, so I wasn't near the university. I would come home. I've got my kids. I've got the dogs. Oh, and did I mention that my ex-husband had back surgery a month before I started law school? So guess what he's doing?
Painkillers.
Yes. And a lot. Yes. Yeah. So first year was the worst. Like, I think I was just on this, like, this with the blinders on again. And I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I just kept telling myself, I've worked and I've waited my entire life to get here. Second year was better. I scheduled my courses so I could work. Then I'd be at school. I had classes in the morning. I had classes at night, and I worked at the school. And I'd go to school like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I was home with my kids and trying to work Tuesdays and Thursdays as a paralegal still. And then, similar to your crash, I had one. Only my crash was my blast from the past. It wasn't a car accident. It was a decision that I'd made when I was a paralegal to witness some documents, legal documents, that were signed by a very close family friend, my ex-husband's family. And so I did it. I followed all the rules. That's probably not the way I could have done better. Let's put it that way. But I followed all the rules, which was verify the signature. Say to the person, is this your signature? Yes. Are the contents true? Yes. Okay. Now I can be a paralegal and witness your signature. Thing is, I didn't see him sign it. But the law says you don't have to see him. You just have to satisfy yourself. And because I knew this person personally for a number of years, I trusted him. Well, that was stupid. That was a mistake. And he died. And then his ex-wife caused a big stink. And in my third year, I was in the summer of my second year, beginning of third year. And I get a call from our regulating body. And I had already written to them. I made an application so I didn't have to do what's called articling. So here in Canada, you do law school, then you article, so like a co-op, practice being a lawyer for a year, and then you get called to the bar. So the Law Society said, you don't have to have your practice year. You know so much from being in law since you were, in your early 20s. We're just going to pass that by. You great, start making the money. And I had to go down to the Law Society. There was an investigator. We had to meet. We had to go over everything, all the stuff. And now, like, there's this huge police investigation going on. A few months later, I get another call from the Law Society, and the investigator, and he said, I have really bad news. One, the police have called me, and they're about to come and arrest you and charge you with 6 counts of major fraud.
Oh, shit.
I'm like, what's worse? We're not going to let you be a lawyer. Everything that I had worked for from the age of 15 to 40 by now was gone. Everything came crashing down around me. I got arrested. I had to go turn myself in. It was horrible. The police that was investigating this was very jaded and very biased by the dead guy's ex-wife. He gave interviews to the local newspaper, and when you live in a small town, boy, oh boy, does a very private matter become a public matter.
Yeah.
Really fast. Really fast. Yeah. So talk about, when you said, like where your mind went, right? Same thing for me. As soon as that happened, all of the narrative, right? You're worthless. You're stupid. They don't want you. You're a loser. You're an idiot. You're just a teenage runaway. Who were you to think? This is what I'm telling myself, right? Who are you to think that you could have pulled this off? Who are you fooling?
Yeah.
It's the narratives, man. It's the stories that we tell ourselves.
And those stories are reality at times. And
they are.
You have to find a way to get out of that. When I got the denial letter from grad school, I didn't think that was an option. Like, I had gotten to the point to where I could teach my professors about nutrition. And it didn't seem like an option to me. And the reasoning was because of what I had done before. So I took it personally as they don't want me because it's me. It's not because of what's on paper. It's because of who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucked, like
it does.
Not really having the tools in place to figure out how to actually handle this. And that tore me down. And so going into law now and actually growing the balls to do this, I still have that fear of, something that's happened years before. I do not have a perfect record. I don't have any felonies. But I also am not allowed to come visit your country unless I have paperwork, because I've gotten a DUI when I was like 21.
So stupid.
That was, and I'm 38 years old now. So a decision I made 17 years ago affects me for the rest of my life. And so I have this constant anxiety and fear of like, am I going somewhere and then I'm going to get there and get it shut? So I can only imagine what that's like to find out, you're going to jail and you're not going to be an attorney. How do you rebound from that? That's not just like a normal slap on the wrist. No. That's you almost make that your identity at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now it's gone. So what do you do from there?
It was, to say it was hard is an understatement. Mm-hmm. I had two boys who had eyes on me and who watched me get through everything, right? And I had them. If I didn't have them, things might have been different. I had a good support network. The lawyer I was working for at the time introduced me to someone who appealed the decision by the Law Society, and I won. I was successful. But that time leading up to that, I was usually good from like 9 till noon. I could work about half a day, and then something would happen. The anxiety would set in, and I was fight or flight. And at that point I was flight. And so I would just leave my office and I would walk and I would go and I would walk and I'd walk. And it was, to be honest with you, I don't know. I was 90 pounds. I couldn't eat. I would sit. My oldest son had moved out. He's going to university. I would drop him off at the train station. I'd just sit there and look and think, where can I just go? Can I just get on a train and go? I can't. I have kids. I can't. I have responsibilities.
Yeah.
I can't. I didn't do anything wrong. That's the point. I did not do anything wrong, and I wasn't going to let this go. So, and there were days I was depressed. I was suicidal. You see the transport truck come in and you think, man, if I just a little step to the left, this is all over. Yeah. But with my luck, it wouldn't be. With my luck, I'd still be alive. So not doing that. Not doing that. No. Yeah. But I had a good support behind me. And I think that was the one thing that got me through it, was I had just the lawyer I was working with was such a good friend, and he was such a good support for me. And he understood, and he lived it with me every single day. The times I'd go into his office and cry, we'd laugh. It was just, I could only let people in to my circle who I knew supported me without a doubt. And that was basically 2 people that grew into 3.
Yeah, so you said two things, and I needed to write them down because my memory is horrible. First off, I wanted to thank you for even saying that you felt suicidal. I feel like so many people have these intrusive thoughts, and they feel like, oh, that was stupid, but it
Yeah,
happens.
it
Those
happens.
thoughts happens, and even when you're in a good spot, like you could be on a tall building and just be like, I wonder what would if, so if you could
Yeah,
extrapolate that to the worst day of your life, and then all you can really see is what would happen if, and the only answer you can get is it's over. And at that point, that's when people don't want to talk about things. Like
yeah,
you shut down and you start to be afraid of yourself.
yep.
You're afraid of everything else, and it's hard to admit that people have had those times in their life. It's not to say that you were suicidal, but
I had a
it just,
moment.
yeah, it goes to show where people can go in life. And do you talk about that moment at all? Because yeah,
Not much. Not
yeah,
much.
and I'm not going to dig into that because
That's
I,
okay.
I understand.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely
yeah,
understand. And then the second thing is this kind of can mix in that mold thing from the start of this, is to where I feel like you're kind of told what to do. You're never shown what to do, growing
no,
up in certain situations. And so I feel like for your kids to see you constantly grinding, you can now tell them, go do this, and
mm-hmm,
they know that from your experience that's what you should do, and they know it
yeah,
works because they've watched you do it. So
exactly.
that is an amazing thing that you've
Yeah,
done. If you've never gotten accolades for that, I want to hand you your
thank you.
flowers right now, because that is an
Thank you.
amazing way. I feel like more people should parent their kids by doing and
Yeah,
pushing themselves to achieve things, instead of telling their kids you can do anything,
yeah,
and then they go clock into a factory, come home, drink beer, watch TV, and go to bed. And they
exactly.
don't try. So for you
Yeah,
to try is amazing.
yeah.
Um, so
And
let's kind of, oh yeah, go ahead.
just to sort of follow on that, and that's where it comes. It's not about the outcome per se, right? It's not about the fact that I got here. It's the fact that this is all I've learned along the journey. And look what the people who are the most important to me in my life have learned as well.
Hmm.
Right? That's where it really lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, you've won this case, which I'm sure was hell, as
Yeah.
as anybody, their career, once you start building something, it's not like losing your job at the grocery store. If you're told you can't be a lawyer, everything you've done up to that point means nothing.
Means
There's
nothing.
there is no backup. And so you win this
Yep.
case, that's got to be huge for you. Now, what's
Yep.
your next steps?
Well, the next step is the Law Society says we agree you have good character. You get to be a lawyer. And that was awesome. I got called to the bar. I have a law license, and I was probably the first, definitely probably the first woman to be called to the bar with significant criminal charges outstanding. So those charges hadn't been resolved. They were still there.
That's awesome.
I know.
Just
Still like,
gangster.
still like Rosa Parks on the bus, right? I'm like, I'm doing it. And
Yeah.
and then it got good, because then I sued the police, and it turned out
Really?
I did.
Good for
I
you.
did. I sued the police, and it resolved in a way to my satisfaction. Obviously, there's confidentiality agreements, so I can't say too
Sure.
much more
Yeah.
than that. Um, yeah, but it resolved very well to my satisfaction. And last I heard, that police officer is no longer.
Hmm.
And I remember when I met with my lawyer, his name was, unfortunately, he passed away this year, Clayton Ruby. He was a very famous Canadian lawyer for human rights and criminal. And I remember we walked into the courtroom to have the charges officially withdrawn. He didn't want it just done that, just some done on paper. And
Right.
we walked in, and the judge was there, and he was doing his thing, and he's like, Mr. Ruby, please, please, please come in. And he tells the lawyers who are already standing and making this amends to sit down, and says, Mr. Ruby, with the greatest apology to your client for what the court system has put her through, all charges have been withdrawn.
I'm moving to Canada.
And that was it. And I turned around and I walked out.
That's amazing.
Yep. And that was it. And, you know, as awesome as that is, I have spent the past 16 years, for the longest time, I still had nightmares. I would get a letter from the law school. I'm sorry, we made a mistake. You didn't finish all your courses.
Mm-hmm.
We made a mistake. You should never have gotten your law license. So even though I had gotten past everything and I'm here, like I'm done, I still had that same mold, right? That narrative running in my head that I was nothing more than a teenage runaway and a criminal.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes those identities never leave us because that identity is the armor that protected us, that kept us going to get where we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to drop that at times.
It really, really is. And getting back to when COVID happened, like I was still going, right? Like I don't trust myself to let anybody in. I don't trust anybody outside of me to let anybody in. And I'm just going to keep pushing through. And remember now, I'm this hyper resilient female lawyer in a very male world. And now I'm in a very male firm. And getting to partner, which is where I am now, oh yeah, that wasn't easy either. I have a little pillow on my couch over there that says, nevertheless, she persisted. And now I'm a partner. I'm the senior female partner at my firm. And I've started to really get tired. Like I noticed after I started staying home when COVID hit, I was exhausted. And I started thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be the tough girl. I just don't want to carry this protective armor. It felt like it was trapping me. So I started doing some research, and I've kind of learned how to fix things, fix that narrative. So that's the way the brain, this is my basic brain knowledge, right? Brain's number one job is to keep you alive. Mm-hmm. That's it. Since the dawn of time, since we were cave people, the brain's function was for us to survive. And that's never changed. It keeps us alive, keeps our systems, keeps our organs, everything. It is busy up there. Your brain doesn't have the time to deal with all of these external and interpret all of these external events that goes on around us. Your brain is negatively biased. And that also comes from our survival years. Watch out, you're going to get eaten. I need to find food to survive. All of the things as cave people, I need my tribe. I need my community. I need to belong. If I don't, oh my gosh, this is what's going to happen to me. So you've got a brain that keeps you alive. You've got a brain that's negatively biased. And there's a quote from Viktor Frankl. And what he
love him.
I love him. And what he says is that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is where your power to choose your response lies. Because how the brain works, I'll give you an example. Just a little while ago, we had this big thing here at the office that they were going to move me from my office I'm in now, and they're going to put me up somewhere else. I don't want to change offices. I like my digs the way they are, but they're going to move me up 2 floors. And I was furious. Like literally, I wanted to rip someone's throat out with my bare hands.
Yeah.
What is going on here? And I didn't feel good about, I just felt awful. I had so much anger and so much rage. I'm like, where is this coming from? And so I asked myself this question, wait a minute, why do I care? Well, I care because this means they don't want me. This means that they must think I'm stupid. This means that I must be worthless. This means I must be insignificant. This means I must be small. And all of that narrative that I had when I was a teenage runaway came back and dictated how I felt about how my office was going to be moved. And that's because the brain is busy and it's negative. And so as soon as it was hit, so the stimulus, the event, right, says to my brain, Stacey, your office is moving. And my brain automatically reaches way back into its filing cabinet and pulls out something that it thinks is similar to what's happening now. And it throws it on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, hold on a minute. Wait a minute. This isn't good for me. How do I fix this? I don't like how this feels. I don't like how I feel. Why am I letting someone else's decision? Why am I telling myself that it's a shitty story about me? And that's what Viktor Frankl is saying. So if you can figure out how to mind that gap between the stimulus and your response and reframe that narrative, that negative habit loop that you have that is built on everybody else's values and beliefs, and turn it into a positive belief that only serves me. That's when you grow. That's when you have fulfillment. And because of the way the brain works, we have this thing called the reticular activation system, right? So if you want to buy a new red car, all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere. Like, yeah. Oh my God, why is everybody driving a red car? Why? Because your brain is thinking about a red car. Now my brain is thinking about, it's watching how I react to situations. And that time that I spend between the stimulus and the response and then having to backpedal is getting shorter. And I'm learning how to replace those negative habit loops that my brain has developed. And I'm learning how to replace them with positive ones. So next time I come into a situation where somebody does something that I now interpret negatively, that hurts me, physically hurts me, right? The stress, the anxiety, the anger, I don't want to eat, I'm raging. That won't happen anymore. Because now when my brain reaches back, it doesn't have to go back 20 years. My brain's only going to go back a couple years or a couple days, and it's going to say, no, it's okay. It has nothing to do with how they feel about me.
Sure.
That's them. How do I see this? You know, I see this as a good move because they're going to renovate. They're going to knock down 2 walls. They're going to repaint it, get me new carpet, and all of my staff, instead of us now being on 3 floors, we're all going to be on the same floor. Do I care whether or not they didn't, think about me initially when they thought about the move? Why do I care? I don't care. You have to, if you're open to accepting those sort of 3 basic principles, you learn how to rewrite the story that you tell yourself to a way that suits you. It doesn't mean that you're lying. It doesn't mean that you're, walking around with these rose-colored glasses on. It just means that you've chosen to look at what's happened to you and interpret it in a way, tell yourself the story that only serves you.
Yeah.
And that dictates how you go out into the world. And that's where you come to fulfillment, growth and fulfillment.
100%. Yeah. I think it's ironic. And just for my listeners that don't know Viktor Frankl, she's talking about a guy who wrote a book based off of his experience in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. So if you can be a guy who's walking around not knowing if he's going to live through the night, I believe he even was one of the workers forced into doing things that he did not want to do, living in horrendous conditions. And he's still able to find out that you can change your mindset and alter your reality. I mean, there's something definitely to be said there for any situation that we're in compared to where he came up with this theory. Because,
people talk about mindset and they think it's motivation, but it's not. Like the amount of power that you can have over how you feel in your life is under your control. It really is. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy. And it's still a journey that I am really working hard to get through. But part of what helps me get through it is talking like this, talking and sharing with people, because if you look around at all the people that you know, it's sad to think that, we all go through our lives. We may be happy with what we're doing, and we may have achieved, and we may be successful, but are you fulfilled? Are you really living what you were meant to live?
Yep. I've also learned that the three, so in my opinion, and I know your time is very valuable, so I'll get you out of here pretty soon.
No problem.
Questions.
I'm a lawyer. I like to talk. What can I say?
I've learned that in order to have that support system, you want somebody to ask you three questions, and in the same time, you need to be able to ask those three questions. And those three questions that I've learned are you okay? How are you really doing? And can I do anything for you? And those three simple questions, I feel like, open up a conversation that you have no idea where it's going to go, but it lets you know who that person really is. And you have to go through some shit, like some real shit, to get to that point, to even realize the impact that those three questions have.
Those are huge questions.
Yeah, they really are. They fit on one line of a piece of paper, but it can be a life-changing conversation.
It can be.
I wanted to just to note that, but then also kind of wrap this up a little bit so you can get out to saving the world again. But I'm curious, very curious as to where a homeless 15-year-old, and I know without even like talking, the ages between 15 and 20, you don't talk about everything. Let's just assume you weren't the perfect person and fill in the blanks. Things could have gone wrong almost every day. Every one of those days, I'm sure something could have changed, and we no longer have this conversation. So that person that says they're going to be a lawyer, and you go through all the bullshit and you jump through all the red tape and you're fighting all these internal demons and you make it, and now you're a lawyer. And what are you doing with that? Like, what type of lawyer are you? What law do you practice now? And do you feel fulfilled in doing this type of law?
I am a personal injury lawyer, which I thought was kind of coincidental when we started talking, because we're both on the same path. You have had your car accident, and I represent people who have been seriously injured. And I fight for their recovery, first and foremost, by linking them up with the best healthcare team I can find for them. And then I fight the insurance company to get the money. Am I fulfilled? Yes and no. Yes and no. Because there's something awesome that comes from knowing I made a difference in someone's life. And that's the only reason why I got into personal injury law, because it's the only area of law that I saw where I could actually make a difference. But it's only money. And money doesn't buy health. And money doesn't buy happiness. So the hard part, what I try to do, is I try to work with my clients to keep them out of the disability mindset that grabs them. And I really work hard to be very client focused and very client centered. I don't necessarily get into my story with them. I don't think it's really relevant, but I do the best I can to touch their lives and make them better.
So in a way, you're kind of taking the Tony Robbins approach in trying to just instill some experience and get them out of that mindset, because my mother is in that mindset of she's always had some money coming in that was never worked for, some medical. There's just always, and especially in this country, you can get away with fucking anything. Like, they'll just give you money just enough to survive, like barely enough to survive. But that was what I saw growing up, and so it's that mindset is a real, very real mindset, and it's very hard to get out of.
Very much so.
And while money doesn't fix everything, if you have the financial education of what to do with that money, it can start to get you to a better place. It can start to give you the tools that you need to fix the things that you don't talk about, and everything
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
right. One final question, and then see if we can't kind of get your social media and everything to see if people want to reach out to you. But
Yeah.
what's next? Because so far you've talked about all these goals and accomplishments and like things you've had to overcome to get here. You're here. It doesn't seem like you're the type of person to be like, all right, I did it. Cool. 9 to 5, like, do you have other things coming up that you're working on, bigger aspirations? I mean, clearly you're a partner at a large law firm. That is a giant accomplishment and accolade. It just doesn't seem like you're the type of person that's okay with just that. Do you have anything else that you're kind of secretly working on, or that you like a side project?
Of course, you know that. How can it be just this?
Right.
There's no way. I just, but no, all sort of laughing aside, I remember, and it was my granddaughter actually. I have 3 of them, 2 granddaughters, and a grandson.
Damn.
Okay, and it was
just like I am cutting you off, but
I don't mean to do it
intentionally. Earlier you talked about cassette tapes, right?
Yeah.
I had a Walkman. Like, I'm 38. You are not that much older than me. So you're a grandma. Congratulations. Damn.
Thank you.
Doing a good job.
I'm doing a good job. Oh, yeah. And, I was talking to my 11-year-old granddaughter. She was talking about being bullied in class. And I started to, share some of my, very thoughts and wisdom. And I remembered that all of a sudden this thought came back in my mind. And I thought, I remembered this day when I made another promise to myself that one day I'm going to share my story, because I don't want anybody else to have to go through what I've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And when that dawned on me, I thought, you know what? I do have a story to share, and I don't have a story that I need to be embarrassed about. I have a story that I'm proud of. And I have a story that can, I hope, help so many people. Because I think the more that we share our story, the more that we help people. And as a lawyer, as I see we have more and more women coming into law, and I want to help them. I want to be able to mentor them to be able to say, yeah, it's going to be hard, and yes, it's going to be tough, and you need to be resilient, but you don't have to run the negative narrative, because you're going to face it. You're going to face it. You're going to be belittled. You're going to be talked down to. You're going to be made to believe that you're not as good as the men. And you have to build your new set of beliefs. I'm the type of person who, that's the belief. I'm the type of person who knows that if I go in here and I do my best, then I'm good enough.
That's amazing.
Those are, right? So I want to take that and I want to help young women, middle-aged women, older women. But I see it really now intersecting with the people that I represent, the people that I work with, and the women who are coming behind me. So that's where I'm going.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I'll kind of end with this, and then we can get your information out there. But I've noticed that people that have struggled to make the climb, that have earned it, that haven't had things given to them, they understand that grind, and it's almost like real recognize real. And when you see somebody in the hallway and you're like, oh, there's something there, and then you're the type of person that actually extends the hand to help out, I feel like that's what's separating you from most colleagues or other people within the field. So I definitely want to give you your flowers for that, because that's an amazing thing, especially you had those people in your life. And so to turn around after climbing the ladder and just extend a hand down, that, what that means.
So important.
You had to happen to you. You know what that means. And so for you to do that is amazing. And I did not want to go with that not being said. So
thank you.
Even though I know I don't work with you personally, thank you for being another inspirational person that does do that, because I feel like we live in a society now to where it's only okay to help somebody else out if there's a camera on it, and then you can post it for the clout saying that this is what you gave this homeless guy $100 or whatever it is. And you're doing the real help of really trying to get people in the door that they can then turn around and actually help real people.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is amazing.
Yeah. It's like the chain, just like you said, you nailed it. It's about reaching back and pulling up those who are coming behind me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
definitely.
what it's all about. Yeah.
So I know I've taken up a lot of your time.
Oh gosh, we went really long, didn't we?
I'm okay with it. I just know your schedule's swamped, but
I'm good today.
I genuinely thank you. I'm very grateful for this conversation.
It was a pleasure.
I may reach out again.
Please.
Where can everybody find you online?
Right now, it's basically just Instagram. I've got, it's at Stacey, Stacey _ LYNNES.
Okay.
That's really about it for now. I've got, as a lawyer, I've got that professional site, the website and the bio and stuff on there on our law firm site. But just from the social perspective, that's the one I'm running with right now.
Okay.
Keeping it small.
Yeah. No, good. I like that. It keeps it real. It's not small. It's real and honest. And then, so one final question that I have to ask, and this is more of a personal one. Trying to figure out how to word this with a similar. So I guess my question is, you having these issues growing up and coming from where you came from and experiencing the things that you experienced, do you live with a constant fear of the other foot dropping to this day? Or do you feel like you've been able to find a place to where you're comfortable and where you're at? And by foot dropping is like, still worrying about the law school thing popping up, or, because I mean, like, it almost feels like being an attorney is such a valuable thing. It becomes your identity, but it can also be taken away because it's nothing more than a piece of paper in a filing cabinet that no one knows where it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious, do you still feel like the other shoe is going to drop? And do you feel like the negative things that you went through hurt you in the process of becoming an attorney?
I feel that if there is another shoe to drop, I'm better equipped to handle it.
I like that.
I'm just better equipped to handle it. Who knows, right? Who knows what life is going to bring? There's no predictors, but I hope I'm better equipped to handle it. And the second question, no, I think what I've been through, I think it makes me a better attorney. It took a long time to get there, because for a long time I was embarrassed, right? Didn't trust me, didn't trust anybody. Didn't want to what are people going to think? FOPO, fear of other people's opinions.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I needed to hear that because I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the U.S. to apply to law schools, you have to also submit a personal letter, along with like letters of recommendation and all this. It's huge. But in the personal letter, I planned on talking about not being the traditional student, being almost 40 years old at the time that I apply, going through struggles and having the intangibles that you can't teach. Because I feel like I can walk into a room and be a very good judge of character, not so much of who you are as a person, but I'm very good at finding out if you have an ulterior motive and if what you're saying is who you are. Because that's so baked in when you live like that. And so that was kind of a strength in my head. It was a strength. But to hear you say that, even if that's not true, I'm just going to keep it and end it with that because I needed to hear that. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
This has been awesome. Anytime.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and do not be surprised if I just randomly message you just to say what's up, because I've
Please
enjoyed
do.
time with you. So
Please do.
definitely.
And I want to know where you're going. And if you need any help, I've got my personal statement that I wrote to get in. I'm happy to share it with you, give you some ideas about what I said to really translate that the fight, right?
Yeah.
You're the fighter. You're the fighter for the underdog. You were the underdog once.
Somebody's
Right?
got to do it.
Now you want to be the fighter for the underdogs. And you're best equipped to do that because you've walked that walk.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's the message that you need to get across in your law school application.
And I will do that. And I will most likely take you up on your offer and read your paper.
Yep,
and
happy to share it with you.
use some of it. So
yeah, no problem.
Well, it has been amazing, Stacey. Thank you again
thank
for
you.
coming on. And enjoy the rest of your day. And
You too.
hopefully this can help somebody out. So it's been great.
That's my goal. All right, keep in touch, my friend.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.